Here to discuss not discounting our commission, Carolyn and Paul Zweben with Douglas Elliman.
New York City, the market you're in, has the distinction of being one of the most competitive marketplaces. Like my wife used to work with you at Douglas Elliman. I used to know I used to live here in the city, and I would see it firsthand. The agents here are tremendous. A lot of them are extremely highly educated. They go into the business from another successful career. So it's very competitive in that range. You have average sales prices well above $1 million, well above $1,500 a square foot here in Manhattan. And you've got great brokers, great agents, an incredibly high average sales price. And with all that, you're still, brokers and agents in this market are still commanding premium, what we would think of as premium commissions. We can't talk about numbers, you all know why, but premium, extremely, for the market nationwide, very high commission rates. How is it that in this kind of market, when the prices are high and competition's high, how is it that brokers are still commanding those kinds of fees?
Do you want me to go?
Yes, dear.
Okay.
Yes, dear. Good husband, yes, that's good.
I think in New York, you have to be not just a broker, not just knowledgeable about real estate or about a building or about applications or about getting in, but it's also, you have to be people's go-to person for everything, and I think that the really good brokers in New York are your go-to for everything. They can get you that reservation at Rayo's. They can get you in to see, Jennifer Lopez's colorist. They know the people who sit on the boards of like the most prestigious schools in New York City. So they're connectors.
Yeah.
And I think that people trust them. The really good ones are trusted. There's no doubt about that.
So besides the fact that we now know that Jennifer Lopez has a colorist,
yes,
which is something I would not have necessarily known. So your point is that brokers here do more, that there's a deeper relationship that they have with their clients, and is that, so when they end up being called in to take a listing, they're not being asked the question, people don't expect it of them the way they would expect it when they don't know the person? What's the connection between the more expansive level of service that you're describing in terms of what agents do, and the fact that they're not, when they do take a listing, they're taking it at a premium rate?
I think it's just, I don't think we have a choice. I think we have to know everything about everybody and everywhere, because people look for us for this kind of information, and then in terms of commission, I think that 85% of the property in New York is still co-ops.
Yeah.
And that plays a lot for us. That really solidifies the importance of a broker.
Yeah. Because
it's not just about getting the listing and posting it on your website. It's about a process.
It is definitely a more complicated process. I mean, I've seen that firsthand, how much more work you have to do to move a co-op than you have to move a condo, and a co-op in Manhattan, even more than, if people have experience with co-ops in other markets, they don't quite understand what you have to deal with when you're getting something through a co-op board in Manhattan in some of these buildings. Now, Paul, you came to real estate from a totally different industry. You had an extraordinarily successful restaurant business, and I know because two of my favorite restaurants of all time were two of yours on the Upper West Side. Just tremendous work that you did in that business. You transitioned over. What did you learn from hospitality that helps you in this environment?
Well, the first thing is 26 years ago, I started to feed Joe Rand. He used to come into the restaurant. We would give him all the mashed potatoes he could eat, and then he would leave, which was, that was our first bonding
Main Street
moment.
on Columbus Avenue and 82nd Street. That was one of the great moments of my life, was the bottomless mashed potatoes. Yes. Thank you for that.
So as far as service is concerned, when I was in the restaurant business, it was whatever it took. People that came to the restaurant didn't care if the guy that cooked your fish didn't show up that night.
Yeah.
So you basically just said, we have to rework the kitchen and make sure that it works. And no one cares or needs to know about what's going on in the back. So when I transferred and joined my wife as her partner, thank you for allowing me that, it was basically whatever it took. We have two assistants. In a kitchen, if you guys know this, but when the chef is sort of screaming at you, you just respond, "Oui, chef." and which means yes, boss. And when I sort of belt out nicely, things for the assistants to do, they just respond via text. They're like, "Oui, chef." So we run our business similar to a kitchen and a restaurant still.
Okay. Now let's get to some nuts and bolts, some nitty gritty here. Let's say I'm a seller and you're sitting with me and we're in my living room and we have this lovely coffee table and these joyful chairs and couches. And I say to you, listen, you guys sound great, I'd love to work with you, but I'm not willing to pay more than X%, with X being a 20 to 25% cut from the normal commission you normally command. What do you say to me? How do you respond to that?
I just get up and run away and just say, "Carolyn, you deal with it."
Yeah, okay. Carolyn, what do you say while you hear the door slam behind him on the way out?
In a seller's market, it doesn't matter what your commission is, because that property is going to fly off the market usually if it's priced properly.
Yeah.
So, you have very little inventory in a seller's market.
Which you've had in New York City for a long time,
Right.
until very recently. The market has slowed in the last year or so here.
Yes.
So in a seller's market, there's even more pressure because you know that you're going to be able to sell this listing.
Right.
And that's what, I think people across the country, they've been in seller's markets over the last 2 years. And the real pressure is that if you don't take it at X minus 20%, whatever, X, the 20% below, that someone else will, and they will sell it. And what I always hear back from agents who routinely cut their commission is, well, half a loaf is better than no loaf. And so what do you say? You're sitting there, you don't want to take the cut,
Right.
but how do you convince me that that's not what the seller should be doing? They should be hiring and they
Right.
should be paying the full fee.
Right.
I think, Carolyn and I talk about it prior to walking into the listing.
Okay.
And it depends on, is this a seller that we've done 6 deals with before? Who's going to expect on the 6th deal that we're going to have to
Yeah.
cut our commission? And on that 6th deal, we're going to cut it.
All right, so you will, in circumstances, you'll be adjustable to
Correct.
the needs of the client.
But there are times where we just sit there and don't say a word, because silence is
yeah.
excellent
Yeah.
when it comes to negotiating.
Right.
And I watch Carolyn, and then I just stop talking, and we just sit there, and then they're like, "Okay, good, we're good for 6."
Right.
Yeah.
So the silent treatment is very good.
But
Yeah.
I want the loaf.
You want the loaf?
I want the loaf.
So tell me how you get the
So,
loaf?
you
All right,
know-
silence is good. I agree with that, because someone says that to you and you just sort of let it sit there like a, and
Right.
But because what happens too often is that people they'll jump in.
Right.
And whatever you say, it's like the old adage about the 2 samurai in the rain standing, silent and not moving. And the reason they won't move is the first to move betrays a weakness.
Right.
The first person to say something into that silence usually betrays weakness, and you don't want to betray that. So you just let it sit there for however long it takes for them to cave and to then start to apologize that they brought it up.
Right.
Right.
What else? What else can you do besides just simply the stony silence of disapproval?
Well, I love to show them the inventory. There are 55 other units that are like yours or better than yours that are asking, 6%. Whatever the percentage is, that's competitive. So if we are asking less, guess which ones brokers are going to show?
Okay, so
They're gonna
you'll
show
talk
the
about it
other
from the perspective of incentivizing
Absolutely.
buyer agents to show properties. You have to be a little careful about that. But I understand the point being that you're going to try to say to them, listen, we want to incentivize people to come show and sell the property. You can't do that if you're offering out a lower fee to the other side.
Right.
Let's assume for the moment that it's not somebody who you've done business with before. It's not somebody who's so deeply like a friend or something like that where you might be in. This is just a straight, distant acquaintance. You're taking the listing. You absolutely do not want to cut. So you silence. You talk about that. Give me. They're insistent now. They don't want to do it. How do you explain your value as a way of saying to them, you'll get a better deal from me working with me at my fee than you will working with somebody else for less?
I don't think I'd word it that way
Okay.
because they don't care,
Right.
right? So whatever I can do for them, they want me to do it for less no matter what.
Okay.
So it doesn't matter. I should be working harder because it's a harder market and they're not getting as much, so they want to come in my pocket. So what I would say is, in a buyer's market, you not only have to sell yourself to the buyer, you have to sell yourself to that buyer's broker. And you have to sell yourself to that attorney that's representing the buyer. So I'd rather put my best foot forward with the highest commission possible so that I can get those really good brokers to bring their buyers in, but also it gives us, and this is just a tactic, but it gives us negotiating power later. Buyer needs to feel like it's like they're stealing it, right? So let's let them feel like they have the power. Let's ask the higher commission, and then once we get to the negotiation table, then we at least have a little bit of room to be like, I can say to the other broker, look, let's throw something in there, make it happen, make everybody feel happy. I can't do that unless you started high, absolutely.
Now, what about, how much do you guys use your track record? Because you guys have a tremendous track record of results here. And is that something that plays into it? Are you able to say to them, there's value here, that there's a reason people hire us and pay our fee? Yeah. How do you use that? How do you bring that in?
We tell them, what we do on the Upper West Side. We tell them what we do in New York City. And, there are certain sellers that don't care. They're focused on a specific number. And if we don't hit that number, we're not going to get the business. But, sometimes, especially in this market, maybe it's better to be the second broker or the third broker.
Yeah.
So
in this market, meaning
in this
slower buyer's market,
yes.
You don't want to necessarily take it and have it for 6 to 9 months, and then you're going to lose it. It's the same sort of argument as with price. If the person's going to be unrealistic about price, you don't necessarily want to take it if it means 6 months of having them yell at you they haven't sold it yet.
Exactly.
When you could be the person that comes in on a white horse 6 months from now and takes the listing on the rebound.
I'd rather be the second broker. And most of the time when we come in as the second or third broker, it's usually we need to drop the price and we need to raise the commission.
Yeah.
They love that.
They love that. Yes, I can imagine the joy that they express about dropping the price and raising their commission. But I will say this, there is a value to, you have to be prepared to walk away.
Oh, yeah.
Or you have to be prepared to say to them, listen, what you wanted me to do, I think I'm just going to let you down. So if someone else says they can do it for you, good luck and God bless. And feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions.
Right.
And then you just keep an eye on it, in the hopes that they don't immediately, 3 weeks later, all right, we got to get this sold, drop the price down to where you recommended and get it sold. I actually had that exact same experience when I met my wife. That when I met my wife, my first date with my wife, she was actually on a date with another guy. I didn't know it at the time. She said, come join us, we're all going out as a group. I said, oh, okay, I'll go out and join you. And then I realized about halfway through the evening, she was actually on a date with this guy, Jeff. And so I said, I went up to her, I said, listen, I'm going to leave. Because you're on a date with Jeff and this is his night, but I want you to know that I want my night. And that worked. That worked. The idea that I was walking away, but I wanted to I'm putting a big block right here.
Right.
That I want to, so the idea that you want the listing, you want to pay that commission, you should hire someone to do it.
Right.
But if it doesn't work out, I want you to give me a call in 6 months and we'll talk about it then, and be the person that's sort of out in the distance, Show some strength. So let me ask you this. We have companies, there's 2 types of discounters, right? There's the type that there's people from big companies, agents, who will discount off the standard policy of their company. So they're traditional brokers that will compromise. And then you have companies that come in where their entire business model is discounting, that their whole value proposition is geared toward offering lower price. Which one's tougher, do you think, to counter? Which one do you have to battle with more?
I think that the discount brokerage, at least in New York City, for us, we're just brushing them off. Right. Many years ago, we went on a listing presentation, I think at 214 Riverside Drive. We walked into this apartment.
By the way, just so you know, if you're a broker in Manhattan, you remember every address of every building. It's the strangest obsessive compulsive disorder that every broker they can literally, they know every building. They can rattle them off. We took a listing at this number, this street.
I remember the smell of that apartment.
We walked into the apartment and there was a cat racetrack around the whole ceiling.
A cat racetrack.
Yeah. I'm not lying. Yeah. And I was very, very new, and Carolyn was just and she was like, well, we hired this 2% brokerage, and we were both like,
good.
Good.
Yeah.
So I think it's tougher to deal against agents.
Yeah. Who are offering roughly the same thing you're offering, they just want to compromise on it.
Right.
I mean, particularly if someone from your own company is doing that, and then they're saying they're the same, and the client says, well, you're both at the same company, you're both offering the same thing. What do you say? Because I know there's people who deal with that. What do you say in that situation? You're at the same company, so what are you doing any differently than she's doing for a lower commission?
May I?
We just, sure.
Sorry. It may depend on, is it a team? Do we know if that head team member is actually going to show the units? Are they going to be really hands-on? I know for a fact that when we're doing something, basically we're the 2-point people. So that may be a way to diversify. It depends on who we think we're going against, and we don't always know.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, but we recently had a situation where this seller had a list of things that other brokers were willing to do, big brokers, and we were just floored. I mean, these people were willing to raise the price, which made no sense. This had been sitting on the market.
List. This is a real
Yeah,
list.
exactly. I mean, this property had been on the market for almost a year, and somebody said they would take a lower commission, they would raise the price by 200, whatever X, I mean, a ridiculous amount, and we were like, why would you do such a thing?
Right.
And if that is what you want to do, God bless,
Yeah,
go.
no,
It doesn't make any sense. But I think that's the most challenging thing. But you know what? I think you also have to change with the market. And I think that when people hear you say, listen, you're right, you have to adjust to the market, and so do brokers, because I want the listing, but I want it at the price where it's going to sell.
Right.
So maybe we'll take a lower commission, but it has to make sense all around. Otherwise, what are we doing?
There's certainly, I mean, listen, the entire listing presentation, the entire consultation with a client, there are so many inflection points where they're moving parts. And you're right. I mean, the sense is that you might be willing to compromise on one if you can get a compromise on the other. That, well, if I'm going to take a cut, at least let's do it at the price where I know I can get it sold.
Right.
I will say this, the most important thing I think that when you're going in, and I think this is the attitude you take, is that you're not there to pitch. You're there to this is the first step toward getting your home on the market, getting it sold. Like, we're here to help you through the process.
Right.
And not, I'm not on an audition to get the job. Like, this is not an interview. This is me. This is like when you go see the doctor. The doctor doesn't think of it as an audition, doesn't think of it like at the end of my consultation, you're going to decide whether you want to hire me. They're basically there to help solve the problem.
Right.
And I think that's the attitude you take in, because that's the kind of attitude that tends to forestall somebody getting into the mindset that your commission, that they can ask you to drop it, right?
It's about the connection.
Yeah.
I mean, I was recently on a presentation with Carolyn, and there was a little 2-year-old boy, and he came and sat on my lap, and I was just like, what am I doing here? And I just held him and we kept going.
A 2-year-old owned an apartment in Manhattan. That's amazing.
Yes.
That is
on the east side, on 72nd Street.
This is an incredible market that 2-year-olds are coming in.
Yes.
We don't get that often.
Very, very low debt-to-income ratio as well.
He's good. Good credit. He had good credit.
Very
whole thing.
good credit.
That's great. Spotless credit. So yeah, you make a connection. I mean, listen, their kid comes and sits on your lap.
Right.
That's a really good sign. It's tough for them to say, hey, will you cut your commission? You're like, I have your child here on my lap right now.
Right.
We don't want anything to happen. I get so startled.
Yeah.
I'll tell you another thing we did is the thing I think mistake a lot of agents make is the phrase all commissions are negotiable is an industry, it applies to the industry, that the industry isn't setting a commission rate. It doesn't mean that a company or an agent can't say my commission's not negotiable.
Right.
And one of the things that we did was we pre-printed our form with the actual rate in the form. So it's in there. It's not a blank. People have blanks in their commission, where their commission rate, usually because they get their listing agreement from the MLS, and the MLS isn't allowed to put a number in there.
Right.
But you are. And like the idea that you put a number in so that it's not, you're not going over the agreement saying, okay, so now what should we put for the commission?
Right.
Like you're not asking that question. Go in, you assume you're getting the number, right?
Right.
All right, so give me a takeaway. Give me one hard takeaway, one piece of advice to the people in the audience as we wind down.
Make a connection as soon as you enter that apartment or house. I think as soon as you make that connection, whether it's a kid connection or whether it's a clothing connection or whether it's a hair connection for women, whatever it is. I mean, I'm
build
serious.
rapport, build
Absolutely.
and establish
Once you have that
something.
connection, that's half the battle.
Right.
People feel less inclined to try to take your money when they like you.
Right.
You might say, I have a whole cat running track in my apartment as well.
Right.
Because that's how you...
Right.
All right, what's your takeaway?
My takeaway is go in, believe in yourself, and be prepared to walk away if you have to.
Be prepared to walk away. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking my panel, the Zwebens. Well done.